Hi, welcome to today's webinar entitled The Lowdown on A3 Software. My name is Jeff Roussel. I'm the Vice President of Sales at KaiNexus, where we spread continuous improvement. I'll be hosting today's webinar, and I'm looking forward to it very much. So without further delay, let's get started. And so as this is meant to be a webinar, which is a demo of KaiNexus and how we manage A3s, let me start by just quickly introducing KaiNexus. We are a software company that is committed to the mission of spreading continuous improvement. And to us, what that means is that we see a future where every employee in every organization is trying to improve the company every single day. And to me, developing a culture of continuous improvement is the single best way for any organization to meet and or exceed its goals over the long term, and really to further its mission in the world. And so, of course, that's a little bit of nirvana, but I do think that we can get there, and we can definitely make progress towards that, where all of our employees are doing their work and improving their work. And I just hope that we play our small role in that journey. Some people do kind of ask me whether that really matters, because I know that there are some business folks out there who may be watching this who may not buy into the concept of continuous improvement. And so at KaiNexus, one of the luxuries that we have is being able to aggregate all of the impact from the improvements that our customers track in our platform. And to date, and these are probably even out of date, but our customers have saved a huge amount of both money and time in KaiNexus. And I just think this is outstanding. I mean, imagine what your organization could do if it had an extra $1.6 billion or the time that people get back from the savings that they track. So anyway, I think this is an important concept. And I also think that it's important to realize that in order to do it right, in order to sustain a culture of improvement, it is imperative that you focus on all three of these primary areas of your people, of the processes you develop, and of the technologies that you use to make things easier. I've seen it time and again, but if you get any one of these areas wrong, you're going to stifle your success, and none of us really want that. And I've personally spoken to probably 2,000 organizations about this, and if you need help deciding where your issues here might lie, please call me after this webinar. Please reach out. I'll be happy to help. I'll be happy to give you my thoughts on how to pinpoint the problem and hopefully start moving toward a solution. Now, as far as kind of KaiNexus is concerned, we focus on the technology piece of this puzzle. And so we've built a software platform that we use to help bring about the correct leadership behaviors and processes for our customers. The way I see it is we're relieving them of the burden of building and managing their own software solution, and then they can focus on their people and their processes. But specifically, we've built a system that brings together the needs around collaboration and the needs around reporting into the same system. And I think when you do that, both the collaborative side and the reporting side can flourish with really minimal waste. Having these in multiple systems like spreadsheets and PowerPoints and et cetera can really be a recipe for disaster due to just the wasted motion that is incurred, and to the fact that there's misaligned motivation. I mean, the people that are doing the collaborative work, if they have to then go and report on it somewhere else, well, that reporting doesn't really help them. And so they're less motivated to do it. And I think by bringing all this together in one system, it's just a much more natural fit. And we've seen that time and again. And so in KaiNexus, customers use us to manage different types of work. We've actually reviewed all three of these in previous webinars. But those three areas are strategy deployment, where they're aligning their work with the strategic goals and the KPIs of their organization. Top-down efforts, where you're executing on relatively large projects that are assigned and tracked by managers. And then bottom-up efforts, where you're really leveraging the collective knowledge of your employees to bring about small, low risk, rapid change throughout the organization. And if you're interested in these concepts, I would tell you to visit KaiNexus.com, or these will be linked in the slides here. But we went through these in detail in a previous demo series. In addition, today we're going to talk a lot about the concept of an A3, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm going to be teaching about A3 thinking or anything like that today. I'm just not the expert there, but we have had some recent webinars on this topic that I think were outstanding. And so if that's more in line with what you feel like you need, I would tell you, go look at these past webinars on KaiNexus.com by Jess Orr, and it will help you to kind of become a better A3 thinker, versus today what we're going to really talk about is managing A3s across an organization. But let's start a little bit by talking about kind of what is an A3. I think probably most people here might know this instinctively, but just in case, I want to give you my kind of research that I did as I was trying to learn to present this webinar. And so I look at the concept of an A3 as a structured problem-solving approach, a continuous improvement approach. It's not a technology. It's not a specific defined series of steps. It was something that was first developed at Toyota and was really kind of utilized as part of Toyota's way of thinking and solving problems. And in fact, some people actually will call this a Toyota business practice. So you might hear that as you're kind of talking about it in different circles. It is based on PDCA. So for you kind of lean or improvement people out there, the concept of PDCA or plan, do, check, and act. And this really allows you a structured way to do small, rapid improvement cycles that can then lead to much bigger changes. And the A3 kind of fits nicely around that. We'll look at that in just a second. It is also divided into a number of problem-solving steps. We'll take a look at that in just a second, but it kind of takes a bigger problem and tries to break it down into smaller steps. And I think it's kind of one of the I guess the advantages to using this way of thinking. And then the term A3 was actually used for the size of the paper that is traditionally used for its documentation. And so the concept is to try to give people a way to condense their thoughts into manageable chunks. And so if what you're working on doesn't fit on that sheet of paper, then it probably is an indicator that you need to break it up into smaller pieces. And so we'll see that a little bit, that the paper of writing out an A3 is an important concept around it. And then lastly, an A3 needs to be thought of as a collaborative approach to solving problems. I heard this quote from John Shook recently, and he talked about how it takes two to A3. And anytime I say that, I can just hear Louis Armstrong singing it. But anyway, an A3 is not meant to be something that you solve on your own. It's meant to be a way for you to collaborate and maybe even play a little catchball about a problem with an executive or a sensei or a coach. And it's a way for more than one person to actually work together to solve a specific problem. And so let's talk just quickly about the problem-solving steps. By no means are these the exact problem-solving steps. People have kind of created their own traditionally, but I just am showing 7. Typically in an A3, we're going to develop a background on the situation at hand. That's going to be part of the plan process in the PDCA. Then we're going to come up with a detailed problem statement, again, part of the plan process. And then we're going to come up with a goal statement and where do we want the solution to be. And we definitely see this as being an important part of thinking through any problem. And then typically we're going to spend some time using various tools to do root cause analysis. So we actually get to the concept at hand and we get to the pain point that we're trying to solve and what's really causing it. I think in my experience, what I've seen is, people skip this step more often than they should. And really, you should never skip it because it's an important part of solving the root problem, which is really one of the key principles of lean or of the Toyota production system. And then as we kind of move along through the A3, we'll develop a set of countermeasures that we'll use to facilitate our hypothesis. And we'll do, they call it effect confirmation, but essentially we're testing here to make sure that the changes that we're making are actually effective and leading to positive impact. And then we'll have a series of follow-up actions to make sure that we're doing this right. Again, you might have your own kind of A3 methodology or your own series of steps, but this will give people who don't just an understanding of kind of a standard methodology or a standard approach that you can use to help teach people problem-solving thinking within your organization. So then that gets us to kind of the main point of this webinar, and that's A3 technologies. If you believe that people, process, and technology play a role in solving problems like this, then it behooves you to pay attention to the different technologies that people use to support continuous improvement and to support A3s. And the first A3 technology, and quite frankly, I think it's the most important A3 technology, is the one that we all have, and that's our brain. Because an A3 is really just a way of thinking about solving problems. And in order to do that, in order to think, we have to use the best computer that we were given, and that's the one in our head. The challenge comes around that technology, our brain, is fantastic for processing a ton of information from all different angles. And it's really, really good at helping us to creatively solve problems. However, that technology is not so good at remembering and recalling tons of very specific information and recalling it at very specific times and with exact details, because we've got so much information that we're processing there that sometimes recalling it is really hard, and oftentimes sharing it with others is really hard. So I think this kind of goes to any technology. There's some really positive aspects to the brain as an A3 technology, but there's also some drawbacks. And really the next technology is the one that we developed to try to solve some of those drawbacks. And so right now, the most kind of commonly used technology to support A3 management is pen and paper, or pencil and paper, depending on how exact you want to be. Again, I think this is a fantastic technology. I think that for some situations, this is easily the perfect technology to use to manage A3s. It really helps people to think using visual cues. And I think paper does a good job of helping to kind of spatially put that information together. I also think it helps people to start and stop at various points along a long process. You do a little bit on your A3, if you can put it on the paper, and when you come back to it, it's there. And it does make the job a little easier of sharing our work with others. And it gives us an agreed upon format to do that. However, there are shortcomings with pen and paper. It's difficult to share at scale. It's hard to collaborate around it, especially if you're not standing in the same room. And it's almost impossible to recall an A3 on a moment's notice, especially if you're grouping them by certain topics or stages or results or things like that. And so again, fantastic technology has its own advantages and disadvantages. And so that really led us to kind of try to solve some of those problems with KaiNexus, which is really a technology designed to help people manage A3s at scale. If you just have one or two small A3s, then you're in a much different situation than someone who's trying to teach dozens, or sometimes we see even hundreds or thousands of A3s across a large distributed organization. So I would tell you that you need to think about what's the right technology for your situation to help you meet your goals. And then you should kind of figure out how to solve the technology problem there. But if you do find that what you need is something a little more complete because you've got a bigger problem on your hands, then what I would tell you is that CI software will solve some very specific issues, starting with the concept of visibility, helping people to see all of the A3s that are happening across an organization, understand the status, and share that information both across employees and up and down through an organizational hierarchy. The next concept that technology really helps a lot with is collaboration, and that's the ability to communicate with other people around an A3, but also to assign things like countermeasures and next steps, and make sure that those things are not going to fall through the cracks as we work on them. And then there's the concept of setting up standard templates and workflows. Paper does a good job at helping to create this kind of standard. I think online technology takes it even a step further because you can define what templates and workflows you want, and it will help kind of drive that throughout your organization. And then impact is a big one. You'll have to decide whether your organization needs to track impact, like this slide I showed earlier, but by using software, you can do this much more easily than if you don't. And then lastly, having a searchable knowledge repository. This is really that ability to go back in time and say, what did we work on? What A3s did we work on around a particular topic? And how can I learn from the efforts that we put in the past? And so again, you may not have these problems. If you're just working on a couple of A3s, these might not be pressing for you. But if you're trying to do this across an organization, then I would tell you that this is a good place to look. If you feel this pain, then technology can oftentimes help lend a hand here. Okay, so let's take a look at KaiNexus and see how this applies to organizations that are managing A3s. KaiNexus is a combination of dashboards and project templates that you customize, and reports and notifications that really work together to help people manage A3s at scale. And so regarding the A3, the dashboards are especially helpful at really giving both people and teams and PI coaches a place to organize and keep track of all their A3s and the corresponding statuses and all the steps and the tasks that go along with it. So for instance, this is a personal dashboard, and this is a spot where one person might keep track of his or her A3s, and I feel like it gives them a sense of where things stand and what status they're in and when the due dates are approaching and what things have already been completed. So it really ensures that none of this information is falling through the cracks, and I think that's a very kind of a part of managing A3s that oftentimes is overlooked. And so in a very similar way, a similar type of board might be utilized to help teams manage their A3s. And so at a team level, it's a little bit different because at that point, we're combining the A3s of a group of people, not just one individual. And teams tend to work on a series of A3s. And what I find is that those A3s are oftentimes at different stages. And so, for instance, across our team, we might want to know, well, what are our new A3s? Which ones have we not talked about yet? And which ones are planned? Which ones are we going to work on once we free up some time? And maybe we set a rule that we're only going to work on, in this case, 8 A3s at any given one point in time. And we may need to kind of go through in our weekly meeting and talk through each of these 8 and figure out where they're at and what the next steps are. And then I would say, as part of our weekly meeting, we might review any completed A3s so that we stay on top of the work that we're doing, and it keeps us to having a fresh perspective. And so again, we're simply using dashboards to organize and highlight all the A3s, in this case, that are managed as a team. Now, The same thing might be tracking A3s at a higher level across more of a parent-child relationship. We see often where we have parent A3s at the highest levels of an organization, and as we kind of go down in the levels, we see the child A3s. And this is very difficult for organizations to kind of manage and keep track of. And with KaiNexus, it becomes pretty easy to organize work in this parent-child relationship. This comes into play oftentimes in strategy deployment. And so from a strategy deployment perspective, it's important that we know the status and the KPIs of all the A3s that we're working on. And we need to then see all the child A3s that are going to roll up to that. And so if we expand this part of the dashboard, you'll see some of the customization from a dashboard standpoint of being able to include certain pieces of information around each A3 so we can quickly make a status update, and then we can drill into these A3s and really kind of dig into them and figure out what the next steps are based on who owns it and what stage it's in. In addition, using the same kind of functions, if we go here into the training classes A3, and then we look in our lean certification program, what you'll see is we can actually use KaiNexus to manage all of the A3s that are part of a lean class or our lean certification program. And so as we're teaching lean and A3 throughout our organization, you can imagine how much easier it would be for a class instructor to keep up and answer questions and really just make sure all of the A3s that are being taught are moving forward, both during the class and even after the class when the employees have kind of gone back to their day jobs, and we need to still keep track of the projects that they're managing. And so to me, again, this is just another example of using a system like KaiNexus at different levels of the organization, both from a personal level, a team level, a project level, a strategy level, and even in a training class. So the other really important concept around A3s in KaiNexus is the concept of a custom template. And some organizations decide to do that by just having one template that they teach. And so, for instance, we might have a standardized A3 template that we allow our employees to create. But other organizations might choose to have multiple templates. And so we see organizations with things like A3s and then maybe an A3A. And depending on your training level, you might create one template versus another. And these different templates can be utilized for different people with different skills and different training levels. And so let's take a look at a couple of examples of these custom templates. We've got one here called storage organization. And if I open it up, you'll see that it really looks like an A3. This is simply a project in KaiNexus named storage organization. What we've done is we've customized the various areas of the project in KaiNexus to mimic the steps of an actual A3. So really and truly, this is going to look similar to an A3 on paper that people use. And you can customize what steps and what fields go here. But I think what's important is that really this gives your people a chance to work on projects that visually look like an A3. They can do it electronically, so it's very similar to what they've done on paper. But now that they're doing electronically, it becomes searchable and it becomes shareable and just all those things we talked about earlier. And so another thing this does is it really makes sure that if I'm working on an A3, that I'm going to go through all the different steps required. So I know if my background is not filled out. I know if my current condition is not answered. And I think this becomes really helpful because it allows organizations to teach a standard A3 method and spread it to more and more of their people more easily. And so you might say, well, wow, this is not exactly the A3 template that I use. And I would say that's great. In fact, If we look at a different example, for instance, this part presentations project, this one is a little simpler. We've actually designed this one not to have all those different boxes. And so it doesn't look as much like a traditional A3. And in fact, we might not name it a traditional A3. We might name it something else so as not to confuse our employees who haven't been trained in this methodology. However, as we're working on projects, we still want to capture things like backgrounds and goals and current conditions and root cause. And it gives us a way to section that information off that in a way that might be just a little easier for certain employees. And then lastly, we'll take a look at another example. This one is customized, but what you'll see is that instead of having all the different steps of countermeasures and tasks and etc., what we've done is we've essentially just given our people the ability to enter text in a visually pleasing manner. So they can keep track of their A3 thinking, and really they can do it on their terms, on the way that it's most important to them to capture this kind of information. You can see we've done a 5 whys here. You can see we've created a plan. Again, this is very customizable, but I think the goal here is to pick a methodology that your people can get behind and that can help drive their A3 thinking. And so the way I think about A3s is that they should be part of an overall continuous improvement solution. And we see this with a lot of our customers where we give people the ability to create things like a very simple improvement or a suggestion or a just do it, as some people call it. But others might have the ability to create A3s. And I think what's interesting is that in KaiNexus, you can really convert between the two. So something that starts out as a simple improvement might be converted to a project or an A3, and then we use that as our problem-solving methodology. To me, what this really does is it helps the A3 be a part of both the strategy, the top-down, and the bottom-up components of an overall complete continuous improvement program. And I really think that the A3 becomes a wonderful tool to do that across all those different levels. In addition, I think it's important that we be able to search for things like all the A3s in our organization. It amazes me how hard and how difficult it is for employees to find all the A3s that we've done in the past. And I think that's just unfortunate, kind of a downside of the technologies that we use, pen and paper and etc. Electronic systems like KaiNexus really make it easy to search for this type of information, and it makes it easy for people to see what other people are working on. And I think there's just a valuable acceleration when people can see what others are doing. And then lastly, we'll take a quick look at reports, because I think just like every other improvement mechanism, A3s benefit when you keep track of them and understand the health of your A3 culture. And so KaiNexus provides data around the status of the various A3s that you work on, your people work on. It provides data points around the activity and the engagement of your people in working on these A3s. And it can even give you visibility into the impact of the work that you're doing around your A3s. And what a better way to help to get executives to buy into the A3 concept than to show them the impact of the A3s that you're currently working on. And so I hope that this webinar has been helpful for you. It's been very helpful for me as a learning experience, just getting to prepare for it. I feel like as you're thinking through the challenges that you have in your organization, the A3 presents itself as a great option for structured problem solving. And if you're doing multiple A3s, then ultimately I feel like a system like KaiNexus offers a great option to manage those with visibility and collaboration and helping you to create some standards around it, and ultimately understanding the impact of the work that you do and being able to share that in a repository in a very functional way. And so if anyone wants to learn more, I'm always happy to help. Please reach out to me directly. Otherwise, we'll go through some of the last housekeeping steps and we can wrap up this webinar.